Hello and welcome to Supercharged, episode 188. I'm Adam Dotches.
And I'm Tommy Houghton.
And today we're talking about some depressing shit.
Yay!
I don't know how to preface it other than obviously Parkland and the school shootings have been in the news a lot lately. What's been happening around that is kind of unprecedented in a way that I think is great in the sense, well, not in every sense. I suppose what we're going to be talking about is not great. But in the just seeing the kids actually say like, no, this is not okay, and we want to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. I think you can debate whether or not you agree with how they think it should be handled.
You mean all those crisis actors that are going out there?
Exactly, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. It's not so much about the, which side is right or which solution could work, for gun control or gun rights, or I don't even know what terminology to use anymore. But I wanted to try to look at this
gun rights, because guns have a right.
Yeah, rights for guns.
Yeah,
the right to bear arms,
and not the kind of animal bear.
Yes,
because I would support bear arms.
You can get that shirt too.
Yeah, I love that shirt.
You can buy the bear arms on Amazon. I don't want to go into the political side of it. I feel like that has been trying to think of I was going to use a turn of phrase that would maybe be inappropriate in this situation.
Shot like a dead horse?
Not quite that much. But good job.
Thank you. It's like shooting a dead horse. Well, the really inappropriate one is I don't want to say, but yeah.
Oh, I don't want to know what it is.
Like shooting a dead school child?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's not even a phrase, though.
It's not, but it could be.
I suppose shooting a dead horse isn't.
Yeah,
beating a dead horse is.
Yeah. Well, you save bullets that way.
Well, we've really covered the spectrum there.
But because school shootings are becoming so common, that could become a phrase.
That's true. Hopefully after we maybe have solved the problem.
Yes, I would hope that phrase does not become a thing, because I'm against school shootings.
Yes, we all are here on Supercharged, as everyone should be, I think. Mass shootings in general, not good. Unless
it's a school full of Hitler clones. Mm-hmm. That are all already like programmed to become evil.
Yeah, I mean that's the difficult thing, and maybe actually relevant here, is that there's not there's always an exception to everything.
Yes,
you can always come up with an exception.
Although I wouldn't want them to be shot. I would want them to be either rehabilitated mm-hmm. or humanely put down.
Mm-hmm. However, there is definitely a circumstance in which that is the solution. If it's kind of like, oh, well, they're going to take over the world unless they are all systematically shot with AK-15s.
That's their only weakness.
That's what they're called.
That's their
I don't know guns.
That is their only weakness.
Yeah, if that's fortunately, that is not a scenario that's going to happen. But all silliness aside, I wanted to actually look at this topic in terms of, I guess, more logical approach. But I wanted to start with this by discussing how information is being disseminated. I think that I think there's a problem. I think everyone knows there's a problem with the way things are being talked about, the way that news is being promoted, the way that incorrect facts, or whatever the hell we're calling them now. I don't even remember the opposite of a fact anymore, because it's just fact or alternative fact.
Or lie.
Yeah, lie. I mean, that's the word that's in my head, but isn't there something else?
Not truth? Yeah.
I think maybe we need a word for that if there isn't. That said, I wanted to discuss, I guess, what's going on in the situation, and maybe we'll figure something out in terms of why all of this keeps happening and what can be done about it. Because I was just, I guess, reading about it yesterday and watching some stuff about it yesterday about how there's yet again another conspiracy, much like Sandy Hook, where they're saying, oh, this school shooting didn't even happen, and and that these kids are, like you said, crisis actors and are being hired by Soros, I believe.
George Soros.
Yeah, to push an agenda of gun control, which I'm not entirely sure the logic behind that. What is making people think that there would be this great agenda to control the guns? Is it just to like take power away from the people? Is that what the idea is?
I mean, it goes back to the nature of like false flag operations, as they're called, are basically military invasions by, that are
fiction.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, there we go. Fiction
is the opposite of a fact.
That's good. Fact or fiction. Yeah.
I needed the dictionary.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, false flag operations are essentially if you want to bolster support for a claim and you can't get people to support you or don't believe your claim is legitimate, well, you prove your claim by doing the very thing you're trying to fight against in hopes of rallying support. And this is a false flag operation in the sense that you have liberals who are staging a school shooting because you want to control guns. And by doing something that shows how horrific they are, then you will get people on your side and they will do something about it. That's at least in theory what people will say. That, any kind of terrorist attack, any kind of attack of any kind, you can argue on both sides that this is why we should pass measures to stop it from happening. Or you can say, well, the side that wants to pass measures staged it because they want to really push their side. And conspiracy theories have been around for a long time. The internet has helped them spread in an easier way, especially with the ability for Twitter, Facebook, YouTube to subvert traditional news sources where responsiveness is who gets the most attention. It doesn't matter if you spend a couple extra hours fact-checking a story. If you're out first, even if you're wrong, you will still make a strong impression. So a lot of conspiracy theory ideas have really been peddled through YouTube and these sites that allow for people to push things out that aren't news or verified, but people can see them. So a lot of this thinking from the London subway bombings all the way forward, 9/11, Oklahoma City, you can look at any kind of mass disaster, shooting, terrorist attack, and always find people that believe that it was a false flag or an operation to push forward the measures that would help, quote unquote, prevent these things from happening, but really about taking away rights or guns or whatever it is.
I think that's a pretty good synopsis of how that works. I mean, that sums it up pretty well. What do you think? What do you think allows people to believe in these conspiracy? I mean, because there isn't a factual basis for them. There's like stuff that sounds like it could be true. You can obviously concoct a narrative around all of this stuff that is, I mean, that feels accurate, but it confuses me that with all the counter talk, and maybe I just hear both sides more because I try to, but with all the counter talk against this stuff, I don't understand. I've tried to, and I have. We've had on this show a long time ago a conspiracy theorist and talked about this specifically. I don't understand how that message still gets through that they don't ever question it, because I mean, isn't it about questioning? It is. It's about questioning, and there's a lot of really interesting topics I've heard. There is a podcast called You Are Not So Smart that discusses, I think, I love him. Yeah, probably the best discussion about conspiracy theories that I've heard. And like another one, The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe also discusses, they have a really great one about conspiracy theories. So the idea is that it is about questioning things, but there is obviously like a natural set of blinders when you put them on. Because the idea of, I remember the Orlando nightclub shooting. The Pulse nightclub, there was a gunman that shot a lot of people. It was very sad, like every mass shooting is. And there were weird little quirks that people would point out. And same way that Loose Change, that bullshit, quote unquote documentary that was on YouTube about 9/11 being, an inside job and having all these things. All the people are doing in those instances, they will say, I'm just asking questions. And what they'll do is they'll find weird things. Like the common meme that came out of Loose Change was that jet fuel can't melt steel beams. And so people believe that there were explosions that happened inside the towers on September 11th. And while it's true that jet fuel can't melt steel beams, it is not true that, the plane didn't take it down. It did. The challenge is that steel and beams can be compromised by the heat from jet fuel. So it doesn't have to melt them, it just has to compromise them where they fall down. And so it's the idea of they raised a question and it's been answered, but they don't care about the answer. The idea of the existence of a question or poking holes in something. So like after the Pulse nightclub,
There was a weird instance of someone laughing or like seemingly able to walk after being carried out of the nightclub.
Is that actually what?
Yeah, there was some CNN footage of someone who was being carried away from the scene, who then once they got what they thought was quote unquote off camera, they were able to walk. And it's like, what does that prove? But
it doesn't prove anything.
Yeah, it does exactly.
It's like. There's so many questions to add. I'm only saying this because I want to be clear that I'm asking, did it actually exist?
Yes, the footage existed.
Whether it existed or not doesn't mean that it was a problem.
Well, yeah, so the footage existed, but the thing is, it doesn't prove anything. Yeah. All it proves is that there's someone in the background being carried who's able to walk after being carried.
It is half the time some of these things don't even exist in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
And they just say they do. Like
when Carly Fiorina was like watching a video about a doctor having to harvest a baby's brain.
Oh, okay, hold on. We're going to talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Richard, my boyfriend, his former roommate dated that doctor.
What?
That was in the video.
Well, that video isn't even real.
It is a real video of him.
It's a fake video. It's not even. Yeah.
I mean, it's not what it says it is.
Yes.
But I should say not the harvesting video. The one talking about that.
There we go. Okay.
He's the guy in the video.
Really?
I'm really disappointed that relationship didn't work out because I wanted to meet that guy. So
oh my God, that sounds amazing.
So curious.
So to explain
what that was like, apparently his life is not great. I'll tell you that. From what I can tell.
In the debates back when we had at least a seemingly sane political system, relatively speaking now, in the debate for president, Carly Fiorina, who was at one point a candidate, said that she saw a video, which she did not because it doesn't exist, of a group of doctors trying to harvest a baby's brain or heart, and that they had to keep it alive to harvest the tissue. It sounds like something out of a horrible B science fiction movie. I
remember I got in a public argument with my uncle when this happened. The one that I bring up and occasionally on the show. Some of the people on the show know because they commented on this thread where he was, he started just bashing my friends and being a terrible
Sorry for
person.
That noise.
Yes, that is just water.
Yes.
This water for those of you watching the video. But yeah, he had like linked to it, and I said, "Newbert, did you?" That's his nickname.
Wait, Newbert?
Nooper.
Nooper?
His real name is Daniel. His nickname is Nooper because he used to snoop all the time, and the girl next door couldn't pronounce her S's. So they nicknamed him Snooper, but she said Nooper.
Wait, so he was a peeping Tom who got a cute nickname out of it?
I guess. I don't know. I mean, this was in the 50s. I guess
it was an innocent time where you could peep in windows and get a cute nickname out of it.
I think it was more like he probably looked in like his brother's drawers or something. Not pants. But I mean like their closets or whatever. I don't know. There's not really a good way to make this sound any better. And I don't know why I'm trying to make a Nooper sound better. He's just not...
So Nooper is a peeping Tom who believes conspiracy theories.
Yeah. And he believes that the best actor in a movie that I can't really say this for certain, but I had a half an hour conversation with him once, not on purpose, about how the horse in War Horse deserves an Academy Award for Best Acting.
Okay.
Didn't get to your reaction right away there.
I don't know how
to hit that button.
I don't know how to respond to that, but
yeah, neither did I, which is why the conversation went on for so long because I was like, oh, I haven't seen the movie.
I'd have so many questions.
Yeah, apparently the movie was not good compared to the show.
It's pretty bland.
Yeah, but boy did he love that horse.
I bet. I mean, the horse, its performance must have been really captivating.
Yep, I guess so.
I mean, who can say nay to that? Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yes, conspiracy theory videos are weird because they tend to poke holes in the scenario by saying, "Well, can you explain this?" And most incidents that happen on the scale of a school shooting, like Columbine, September 11th, any disaster, any issue, is going to have a lot of moving pieces that need to be investigated. And life is not neat. It's not a clean procedural police drama where everything makes sense. You're going to have evidence that doesn't stack up or maybe coincidental. When you have so many things like if a guy shoots 2,000 bullets or mows people down in Vegas, you're going to have a lot of conflicting eyewitness reports because eyewitness reports are often wildly unreliable. You're going to have conflicting information because maybe, you have a person that dropped or shot a gun, 2 days before to celebrate an event, and those bullets show up too, and you've got two different kinds of guns involved. You're never going to have solid information. And they traffic on that. They traffic on the fact that you're not going to have a completely clean, airtight narrative. And so what they do is they say they're just asking questions or poking holes in things. And as you go further, you have people that then concoct their own narratives to explain away why those things exist. Why is it that in the Pulse nightclub shooting background, you had a person who was, being carried and is able to walk and turns back to the camera and kind of laughs? Does that prove the entire nightclub thing was staged? No. How does that one tiny thing prove anything? It doesn't. So most people use this as a chance, or when I say most people who believe in these conspiracy theories, use it as a chance to further their own beliefs and not buy into whatever they think is being peddled. It naturally stems from a distrust of authority, which I'm all for distrusting authority. I'm all for questioning authority, but I'm also all for accepting certain natures of reality.
Yeah. And I think that's important. But what it does is it points to something to me, and I don't know, I think the problem is we don't really know what it is that is causing people to act this way. And the thing that, from the conspiracy theories I've met, theorists I've met. I
would love to meet an actual theory itself.
That would be interesting. But it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's exactly.
From the conspiracy theorists that I have met, whether I am still in conversation with them or not Nooper's a not, because he was just too mean to everybody.
At least if you're going to be a conspiracy theorist, be a nice one.
Yeah. But that's the thing is, the common thread that I have seen with everyone is that they've been through some pretty extreme hardship, and they may have been borderline on the conspiracy theory side for a little while, but it was when something really bad happened that it went overboard.
Yeah.
Like all this stuff really started to, that it was like, I want an explanation for my pain. I want something concrete that I can hold on to, something that I can do. I'm tired of having to sit here and just accept everything. I want to take action. And I think a lot of people feel that way currently, but there's a difference in between how some people deal with it and others. Because I look at these people, and I'm not saying that their pain is less than my own, but the trauma that I've gone through in my life has been much more significant than any of them combined. I mean, there's some really messed up stuff that we've all been through. I just, for whatever reason, got some of the worst things in my life that you could imagine. But which is not to say that I have a problem with my life. I like being alive, and I like the world. I've actually found that the more trauma I go through, it seems, and not that I'm inviting it or anything, but that I seem to appreciate things more. Sometimes it's a smack in the face with humility. Sometimes it's...
See, I think it's because you have a framework for how to handle and approach the world.
Yes.
I think that's the one...
I absolutely agree. I think they don't have... They were never given that when they were growing up.
And I know we're painting with a broad brush, but there are a lot of traits that do pop up with people who do believe in conspiracy theories. I have a good friend actually, who believes in some really crazy shit. And it's painful to be around her when she goes into the crisis actors and goes into the military government funds Hollywood, which is ironic because she's part of it. So it's like, it's very strange. So the biggest thing that kind of pops up with this is the idea of the mental framework and the idea of what are our brains wired to do. Ultimately, our brains care more about our survival than our well-being. And it doesn't. Our brains don't plan long term or think rationally. Our brains are nothing more than a poorly programmed, evolved machine that has really messy code. And if you look at like a registry, the same way like Windows, we have lines of code that do different things that have simply been built on top of each other. And code does not get erased or become more sophisticated. It just keeps adding to it. So we have a lot of things about our brain that is really messed up that simply is there to keep us alive. One great example you can test yourself with, if you want to see a very basic level of this framework, is blind spots. We have blind spots in our eyes, but you never know it because you don't see them. Because if you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger in the woods, like we are wired to be, you're going to have a hard time seeing when these weird circles of blind spots keep following where you look. You know, our eyes also dart rapidly around, yet we don't feel like our vision's ever jerky. It's because we have these weird little line items of code that simply make it feel like our vision's continuous and not jerky, and covers up the blind spots the same way autocomplete or autofill happens in Photoshop. So when you look at this idea that our brain's meant to keep us alive, it is simply about survival for us. Now, our society's gotten more sophisticated, but we have this core program in our brains that if you've got a belief system that you've accepted, it is really hard to shatter that. Because what that means is you start questioning everything around you. And the deeper you're invested, whether it's a religion/cult scenario where people are programmed to something and you've got to pull them out, people oftentimes will double down on a belief or whatever. But anything you're deeply invested in, it doesn't matter what it is. But if you're deeply invested in a narrative or a thought, it is much easier to keep building the wall of craziness up, adding these interesting aspects of oh, well, yeah, so I believe that, L. Ron Hubbard is a infinite being. And as proof comes out showing that he's not, you have to keep making up narrative excuses the same way in comic books you retcon things, or you add weird scenarios like, oh, well, that wasn't Dr. Doom, that was a Doombot, and he's really over here the whole time. It's just every brick of that builds up your wall of believing this gets higher and higher, and the more you have invested, the harder it is to tear it down. So with a narrative of, I believe X, and if a school shooting happens, and you're like, well, okay, I can accept the fact that guns have some problems in terms of how they're regulated, and that innocent children have died, and that this is real, I can accept that, and have to deal with the fact that, well, would I rather say I'm cool with innocent children getting murdered for my gun rights to not be alienated, or restricted, or curbed, or do I allow for a conspiracy theory to say, well, you know what? That's not real. It's easier to build that brick up because that wall's already built. If you start tearing it down, your brain's like, nope, you go into this weird catatonic shock. If you read people that find out their worldviews or have been challenged, they get depressed. They suffer. They go through these weird things, and your brain would rather you believe something crazy and keep going down the line because you're surviving. Your brain doesn't care about your happiness, or you just need to function. And if you're depressed, curled up in a ball because you've realized you've been living a lie, or that your worldview is wrong, you're not able to function.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a similar, but not on this topic. I'll just say it because I can't think of the way to describe it. When my parents decided to get divorced, I guess I don't know how much of a decision that was mutually, because I don't think my dad was too into it. But
wait, too into the marriage or the divorce?
The divorce. He didn't. I don't think he wants it still, even. But I don't want to air their dirty laundry in public. But basically, once that happened, I think for my sister, it kind of broke down her world a lot. Mm-hmm. She had seen us as like this perfect, happy family, and all of a sudden we weren't. I didn't have that problem because that's not how I saw it. And so when I found out about it, I was like, all right, that's a fact. Mm-hmm. And I tend to do well with more information than less. In every circumstance, no matter how bad the information most people would consider it. It's like, I'd rather know, because then at least I know what I'm doing and dealing with and whatnot. So, I think that's one other way that it presents itself. And I mention that because I think probably a lot of people don't have a point of reference for, the conspiracy theory level problem. Yeah. Or are even necessarily aware that they do have that, mm-hmm. if they do. But it is very tempting to just believe shit. And I mean, because it gives you comfort and explanation over something that that you desperately are seeking. And I don't know if there's we can theorize in the way that theories are supposed to be constructed, mm-hmm. With the psychological evidence that's available, but ultimately people have to be looking into this a lot more closely. And I wonder if there's some sort of study that could be done, or even has been done, that I just don't know about, where when conspiracy theorists ask questions, if instead of saying, no, you're insane, people say, that's a good question, let's look into it together. And they actually go through and try to figure out what the truth is, and not judge them. Because like you were saying, doubling down on that point. So the hard part is, and there are a couple paramount things that I've learned from a lot of the stuff, because you can tell I have no interest in this whatsoever.
that kind of surround that. And the thing is, it's kind of insulating yourself where you're basically leading yourself down a path. It's the idea of you're following a carrot that's dangling in a string and you realize that you're the one holding it. And what happens is they ask questions that often aren't able to be answered by themselves. So you have people asking and saying, well, okay, September 11th, it wasn't planes. It was meant to look like them. And even if they did crash, jet fuel can't melt steel beams. Those buildings should still be standing. So there must have been explosives inside. So you say, okay, well, how do you so I'm asking the question, how do you then prove it was not explosive? So it's hard to prove a negative. So then you can talk about the science of metal and of fuel and all that stuff. But the problem is that relies on having an expert. Mm-hmm. And any expert that talks about it, you can point to and say, well, you're part of the agenda. And that's a hallmark of conspiracy theories, is it's an us versus them mentality. It's a big evil agency of some governmental Illuminati-esque conspiracy that is this shapeless void that you can point to in the shadows and say, well, if you are giving me a fact I don't agree with or disputes my narrative, I can just say they got to you. You're part of it. Mm-hmm. So those two things alone, the fact that I don't know that, I can't prove that, and you can maybe even equip them to go into a lab and do that stuff, but realistically, are they going to? Can they? To go prove that jet fuel can't melt steel beams, but it can compromise its security and integrity, and will make it still collapse. Like, how much money would that cost? And would they even believe? They could say, oh, that then would they have to go and smelt the metal themselves? Would they have to go and prove, are the tools not calibrated correctly? So by the nature of them asking questions, it's never able to be reduced to a level they can accept. And
in those terms, I wonder, is doing anything? Is it possible doing anything? Will anything not reinforce the belief? That's
the thing is, and so you can try to disprove them, and in essence, the fact that you even might come to them and say, I want to prove this is right to you, the fact that you're even there is proving they're right, because what's your motivation to prove me wrong? You must have something to hide. So in essence, anything you can adopt, whether it's you proving something or not, popping up in front of them, they can fold into their narrative. It's like a cobblestone road paved with every aspect of good or bad. You can make it part of your narrative. So there was a point when the explosions happened years ago back in London in the subway, and there was a woman who was kind of the face of the attacks, and she was called by a group of conspiracy theorists a crisis actor, and she got really mad. So she actually went to one of the conspiracy theory meetings. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I'm real. I'm right here. This is my life. And she had people there in front of her telling she was fake. She was an actor. And it's this weird, surreal moment where how do you prove you're a real person with a real life and a real backstory?
Yeah, and with what we've talked about with all the AI stuff, that's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, I mean, imagine with deep fakes and audio proof, what proof, how can you...
The audio just hit a really scary point, too. Yeah. I mean, there's this new vocoder algorithm that I think was just released. I heard about it this morning. I don't know if it's... I don't know how new it actually is by comparison, because I did not look at the date, but given that it was just it came into my news feed, I can't imagine it's more than a week old. It's made for singing, but it is in many cases impossible to tell that it is synthesized.
That's insane. And I'm curious if you could even look at a level of wavelength and determine that's not a natural sound or
And DeepMind WaveNet on DeepMind is capable of being indistinguishable. It's just not that fast. But this algorithm is 10 to 15 times faster than real time.
So that's the thing is
real time, not faster than DeepMind.
What kind of proof can you have? How can you prove someone is real, that a video is real? What evidence do you have? Mm-hmm. And this woman had to walk out really mad. And people often, just the way we are, when you challenge someone's beliefs, they're not going to blindly sit there and accept it. They're going to challenge you back. And so it's this weird evidence-based thing where they want evidence, but in reality, they're going to question anything you give them that challenges it. And in the other side of it, they're going to accept anything that keeps their narrative going. Mm-hmm. Even if you prove that wrong, even if you say, well, that was fake, I just made that up, and you can prove in some kind of way that you made that up, it doesn't chip away their argument, because they're just saying, well, that was one piece of evidence, that doesn't matter. And the fact that you're trying to discredit us by adding fake evidence then proves there's something to hide. And the thing that I always ask people, so I always ask my friend, the conspiracy theorist, is let's think about, okay, let's say you're right. Let's say 9/11 was an inside job. Let's say Sandy Hook and the Pulse nightclub in Vegas, let's say everything was staged.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it is. What would it take to do that? Let's plan it. Let's figure out if, okay, someone...
Just don't ever write it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't let anyone know you're doing.
So someone comes to you and says, I want to stage this. Think about the level of insane amounts of cooperation it would take. The planning, the explosives you'd have to source. I mean, realistically, plan that. And think about it. Let's say it takes on average the same amount of people it takes to make a film. A film set is a very busy hub of things. Let's even a quarter of that.
Yeah. I mean, just look at Wag the Dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Watch Wag the Dog.
Exactly.
And you can see literally, I mean, obviously that's a fiction. Now that we know that word, we can use it.
Yeah.
That is a fiction that I think, though, pretty accurately depicts how something like that could take place and how difficult it would be.
Sure.
And that it is possible, but even the movie, like, you can enjoy it as a movie, but it's still questionably possible.
Yeah.
Even then, like, there's a lot of luck and coincidence involved in why that movie pans out the way it does.
Completely. So let's say that you do, in fact, have this planned out. Let's think about the reality of the situation. You have human beings doing your work. Maybe in the future you can do all this remotely with robots that aren't going to rat you out, and you can erase your trail. But for now, you got to rely on good old-fashioned human beings. Are human beings good at keeping secrets? No,
not really.
How much shit has leaked out? It may take time, but it leaks. If 9/11 was an inside job, think of all the people it would take to pull that thing off, and the fact that not one person has spoken out about it. People inherently aren't evil. People inherently are loud blabbermouths who are weak and strange and have odd needs. And when you've got a conspiracy that big, you would have to have mind-controlled robots doing it. Or if one person was involved, it would leak. Think about it. You would be the biggest fucking story in the world if you could prove something was staged like that. What kind of... You could get paid millions to have a story and go out and do talk show circuits and write a book. And it's just absurd to think about that the level of planning it would take, and that not one single person's ever come out and said something about that you didn't see the planning happening, that would leak. There's no way to keep that thing secret, especially let's say you pull off one, okay, you get away with it, but with all the things they claim are inside jobs, bombings, attacks, shootings, the fact that not one single thing about it has openly leaked.
I mean, and that's the thing, it eventually does come out, but at the same time, there have been real-world conspiracies that did happen,
but never at this level.
Not that I'm aware of at that level. Although the thing is, it's like, at the same time, there's always the question of, what do people? We always hear about the things that don't work.
Sure, yeah.
There are plenty of. I would say that there are plenty of crimes committed on a regular basis that people just get away with.
Yeah, that never get solved.
Yeah, that not only never gets solved, but even
no one even knows it was a crime.
Finds out after the person's dead who committed the crime.
Sure.
But the reason I bring this up is because I think over to Peter Thiel, Hulk Hogan, and Gawker, that was an actual conspiracy that happened and was successful, and everyone knows about it now. Maybe not everybody, but there's no barrier to knowing about it, and that did occur. But
on the level of cooperation, how many people actually were involved?
Yeah, I mean, that's much easier to pull off.
Exactly.
And so you can see the difference.
Versus if I'm doing a shooting of some kind that's going to claim to have a lot of victims, you have to make sure the spaces there, the school exists, all this stuff happens. You
have to get all the families on board.
Yeah, exactly. The level of, again, cooperation. And again, I'm not saying that how complex it is means that's definitive proof it did or didn't happen.
Yeah, and I think that's important.
But the biggest thing to consider is, at some level, you can't, if you're doing the conspiracy theorist mindset, which is, I can't prove that jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. Okay, then we're going to have to look at two different levels of reality. What is more likely? And this is where you introduce the Occam's razor type level of philosophical thinking. Which worldview are you going to believe in? That the simplest explanation is likely the truest. It's not always the truest, but it likely is. And you break down the argument that terrorists got a hold of planes and flew them in as an attack, or that the government, for whatever reason, whether it's invading something or trying to deal with oil prices or just take whatever, deliberately set up planes to look like an inside job. which is easier to believe
the other thing is, it's like, I mean, they did a terrible job at it if that's the case, because if it was to justify a war in Iraq, then what are you dealing with Afghanistan?
Yeah, exactly. How would bin Laden would mess it up? Just put like a thing from Saddam saying like, I did this, and people even believe that he's fake. People really do believe that Saddam was fake, that he was not real. This was back during the Gulf War. That Saddam was an actor. The X-Files actually made fun of that.
That's funny. I mean, and the thing is though, I mean, we can beat the dead horse.
Yes.
All we want, ultimately, you know, I think generally speaking, anyone who's listening to this, and I can't say that for sure, but I think most people listening to this are not falling into the category of like, I think, you know, I'm not going to say that in case someone decides to take a sound bite out of context. But I don't think there's anyone that believes in these conspiracies we're discussing that's listening to this show. And as fun as it is to just prove it, I'm wondering, I guess more so, you know, if we can't disprove it, if we can't, you know, work with people who believe these things to try to come to the truth with them, if we can't counteract that, you can't feed the troll, you can't starve the troll. I
mean, the trolls essentially built a system in which they're always going to be led to the same conclusion, regardless of what you do. So you can't engage with the troll.
Mm-hmm. And then you isolate the troll, and then the troll may, you know, continue with the same problem that we're currently having. I'm wondering, is there anything that can be done for these people other than, you know, starting early and giving people a support system so that when bad stuff happens, they don't resort to conspiracy and fiction?
I think, I mean, that's the thing is, at one point I would say let them have do their own thing and just be on their own, you know, crazy world. But the problem is now that's dangerous with the whole Pizzagate nonsense. There was a guy that went with
Wait, which one's Pizzagate?
The belief that there was a Circle Pizza, or one of the pizza places in DC had a child sex ring, and that Hillary Clinton...
I remember that.
Yeah. Again, my conspiracy theorist friend really believed it.
Mm. Oh, I have one who believes that on election night, Hillary Clinton had to be sedated with drugs because she hulked out after finding out Trump won. And I'm like... What a weird conspiracy to even have.
I mean, if she had that ability, then why wouldn't she just display it out? Like, that person, she would get elected in a heartbeat. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't think it was literal green monster, unfortunately.
So that would be amazing. I'd vote for that.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, I mean, she just lost her shit and was going to go on a tirade, and so her own security people had to restrain her. I'm assuming this based on who I heard this from. It came from Alex Jones.
Well, he's a good friend. Friend of the show, Alex Jones.
Sure, yeah. No, if Alex Jones ever wants to come on this show, not that that's ever going to happen, but I would welcome that. That would be fascinating.
It's funny. There's a great guide I read online where if you ever get confronted by, you know, anybody in the right wing, like conspiracy theory land, and you get confronted by them, there's ways to diffuse every single interview to make sure they never use it. So with Alex Jones, you talk about his ex-wife, the fact that in court he was described as unhinged, and he described himself more as an entertainer than a fact giver.
Yeah, I remember that.
With Rush Limbaugh, you just bring up the fact that he was caught with like 30 different farm prescriptions in his brief, actually probably more than that, but all under different names.
I wonder if he
for
still
oxycodone.
Does it.
Do his oxycodone and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, because it's interesting because on one hand, he seems way too unhappy to be on drugs. And on the other hand, there is that whole, you know, you get addicted to opiates. There's the rage that comes with that.
Honestly, I don't know if it's real rage. It's like he tried. I mean,
I don't either. But
yeah,
I mean,
like Glenn Beck was the same thing.
If he is hurting and lashing out angrily,
it could be
related.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. And then you have Bill O'Reilly, good old Papa Bill, has a lot of great stuff, including the fact that at one point when he was
how long people gave him the benefit of the doubt.
Oh man,
Jon Stewart was fair to him.
There were transcripts of him harassing women, and reportedly what he said over recorded calls. And at one point, he asks a woman how he would basically like finger her in the shower as she was rubbing the loofah on herself, and then he started calling it the falafel.
It gets so weird, and the abuse of power, sex dynamics are just. It gets to a place that's just absolutely so bizarre, and it. You know, like I'm not big on blaming people. I think people have to be accountable for what they did to some degree, obviously, and there are consequences for actions and so forth. But and I don't want to, obviously it's more important to the women or victims and so on. I say this as a victim of sexual abuse in my past. I'm in no way negating the difficulty of that. I just want to be very clear about that. However, there's always that but. It's a situation where I can't help but see a pattern in power where this happens with people in power, and they're looking for. I mean, I just wonder like how conscious they are of it being abuse.
Yeah.
Because they seem so confused when they get called out every time. You see, it manifests itself in some very strange ways that you would think, why would anyone even want to do this in the first place?
I think it's almost, again, it's the same narrative where...
And it's across the board. Everybody.
You may not realize you're doing something bad, but more than likely you know you are.
Yeah,
and people are often...
You kind of know, but you don't really realize the severity of it.
But the challenge is that going back on it, it's like building up that wall where if you got to go back and admit you're a monster and a horrible person, that it requires you dismantling your entire framework about the world. And the brain doesn't like that. It does not like people going back and realizing, oh, I'm a monster, because then you curl up in a ball and a tiger eats you.
Yeah, because when you're in power, you have a specific set of rules that apply to you that are different from a lot of people, because most people are not in power.
When you have power and money are the two things that seem to change people's opinions and let you do different things.
Yeah. And I mean, like, if you think about it, the politicians who are being fed tons and tons of money from the NRA, which actually is something I want to talk about briefly as well, not in the way that you might think. Those people are like, okay, well, this is the situation I'm in. I'm a politician. If I'm going to continue living my life and not change things so drastically that I won't know what to do anymore, I have to keep taking this money. I have to keep doing this thing. They may not even like lying about it, and it doesn't make it right. But they may not want to go on TV and say it sucks that these kids died, but they don't understand what's going on, and it's probably a conspiracy, and it's probably I don't know if these people necessarily even want to do that, but they've put themselves between a rock and a hard place in how they can respond to these issues. That doesn't make it okay. I want to keep reiterating that does not make it okay. It is not right, but I think it's important to look at. Why might this be happening? Yeah,
I think, again, the whole thing about survival, not just the brain, but just the idea of life in general, is it's easier to keep going down the path of least resistance than it is to try to be a hero and give up your source of income, of food, whatever it is for survival. Animals are the same way. And we're nothing more than more...
complex.
Yeah, because I'm not going to say sophisticated, because we're just as messed up as anything else. But yeah, we're more complex. But the idea of a tiger or a lion is not going to go after the strongest animal in a herd. It's going to go after the weakest, because animals they're not trying to show off. I mean, they are when they're mating or fighting like that, but when they're trying to eat, if you kill yourself trying to catch a good meal, that's useless to or not kill yourself, injure yourself. An animal that's injured, if you hurt your jaw, for example, or if you hurt your leg and you are not able to hunt, you die. That's just the fact of nature. So animals are always looking for the least complicated, least costly way to keep going on. And we're the same way. It's more complicated, but if you're in a job and you're unhappy, how many people actually take a stand? I was in a job I hated for 8 years. And I kept telling myself, yeah, at some point I'll get out of here. But it's easier to keep going on than to plunge out into the unknown with the risk of not having a paycheck, not having, stability. And the same thing for when you're a politician. You have maybe private principles you're not going to share with people. But yeah, if it's easy to keep getting reelected and keep your living going and keep going down the same path you've always been going on, you're going to keep doing it. It doesn't make it right or good, but that's the frustrating nature of humanity.
That's interesting to think about. I hadn't thought about it before, but when you're giving those examples, I'm not like that. And I don't know why. I mean, like when whenever I've not liked a job, I just left. When it's time to go, sometimes I would, try, I would make effort. I would always take steps to see, can this be made better? But if I found that it didn't help me, if it didn't feel better, I would jump ship and say, I need to change things. And sometimes that worked really well. Sometimes that was really hard, but it was never worse than, I guess, in terms of that specific thing, there's post-Lifehacker was a little difficult because it was a sick health thing, and that I wasn't going because I necessarily wanted to, even though there, it was getting a little. You can only do that job for so long before you get burnt out, is what I'm trying to say. So it was a little difficult to find the motivation when you're in constant pain. So that's but on top of that, it would have happened eventually. I just would have personally rather waited till the exact 4-year mark, so I could have gotten, because you get a free sabbatical. Or you did with Gawker. I don't know how it works now.
How long?
A month. But if every year on top of the 4th year, when you choose to take the sabbatical, you get like an extra week or so.
Damn.
I don't remember if it's a month or if it's 4 or 5 weeks as a starting. I guess it's nothing now because
you're right.
But that was but for the most part, that's been the case. When there's been something wrong, I say something about it usually, and not always right away, but once I have had time to process it and feel like that any action that I'm taking is justifiable.
Mm-hmm.
And no one told me to do that. I was not brought up that way. I'm not saying that I'm like better because of it. I'm just realizing that what you described and what seems to be the case with most people is not the case with me, and I'm not really sure why that is.
That's interesting, and you should be happy because
maybe. I mean, it's not always fun.
It's not always fun, but the alternative is, it's why do people stay in abusive relationships? Why do people do awful things when following orders? Why do people do certain things like this? It's it's a universal weird part of human behavior. So being able to be cognizant of it or going against the grain, I think it's helpful, because I know a lot of people who are unhappy in situations but don't do anything about it.
Yeah, and I mean, and to be fair to, I don't know, something, I definitely will sit and tolerate a bad situation, because sometimes I always consider, what could I do better? What could fix this? And I don't know why I got into that habit. I mean, Lifehacker definitely pushed it more, because that was kind of the point. But it was, I don't know why I don't know why I make those decisions, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I think, okay, well, I can't do anything. And sometimes I think, maybe I could do something, but I fear the alternative enough not to.
Yeah.
For example, having a relationship with somebody, I just want to be clear, I'm being vague because I don't want to out the person. It's not my relationship with Richard, though. A relationship with a person platonically, where I feel that I don't really exist or matter in it.
That's horrible.
Yes, well, there is one of those. I'll tell you who I'm talking about after.
Rocco.
No, well, maybe a little, but he's a dog, and he knows he knows how to at least pretend pretty well. To the point where I can allow myself to believe that he loves me because he's capable of love in the first place. But that said, there's when I don't feel like I matter in the relationship. I'm just there to serve a purpose for this person. I may be wrong about that, or feeling that that's not accurate, or I may feel that's accurate and it's not completely accurate. And I think that when I'm describing it in a very black and white way, where it's a little bit more complicated.
Please don't tell me it's me. Please don't tell me it's me.
It's not you at all.
Okay. Yes.
But that, nevertheless, it is the case, and I don't feel that there is a solution to the problem, really. And I'm not sure there ever will be, other than waiting for that person to die. I mean,
wow.
Well, I don't mean like it's. I don't mean that in like I can't wait for them to die. I mean that I don't see that seems to be the only way that would change.
Yeah. With all the school shootings that are happening and everything else, maybe that won't be very far away.
It depends. But that said, I want to get back to the information about the NRA and the money that politicians take, because obviously there's this, I guess, necessity to continue to please the people who are paying for your lifestyle. Yeah,
well, so the way that politics works is that when you look at the data, it's often the people who are incumbents win and people with the most money win. Those are two well-documented facts.
Just so we're being comprehensive here, Trump won the election with like almost half the money that it took Hillary.
That's true. Yeah.
So well, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in both cases.
The other difference too is that when you equate all the media airtime and everything that Trump got, that if you bundle that in, he had significantly more because he didn't buy that, but he was given a lot of media attention.
Yeah. So and which is also a fair point. But I'm saying it's like if you look at one statistic, it's not always going to be enough.
If you look at the overall stats, the office of president is only one. When you look at every state, local race from every city council, mayor, governor, congressperson, you name it, the data is overwhelmingly that the incumbents and the wealthiest or the biggest war chests win. Now, what does that correlate to and why does it matter? What really matters is the sanctioned Democratic and Republican parties. They also have a lot of money. And people that are aligned with them get on ballots, get more exposure. So when you become a member of Congress or any seat that has power, even a governorship, you are basically given a dollar value you have to raise. It's never publicly stated. There was a very famous This American Life episode where I don't know if it was Maxine Waters out of California, but there was someone who basically disobeyed rules and made a phone call where she was desperate to a donor saying, listen, I need to raise more money. I've been voting in alignment with what you'd like. I haven't raised the money I need to, and I'm surprised you haven't given it to me. Please give me money. And it's called just dialing for dollars. And what they do is they assess how much money you can bring in. And it helps. Everything you have that gives you seniority or power increases how much money you can make. So if you are on a committee, that's great. If you're on like Ways and Means, that means pretty much nothing. But if you are on a well-known committee or one that is very powerful, like a security committee of some kind or one that regulates the internet, those are very important. And being on that committee can make you more money. If you're a senior member of a committee, if you're head of the committee, if you've been in office for 30 years, any of these things make you more valuable and therefore put the burden on how much you have to raise. Now, if you don't raise that money, the party's not going to suddenly say you're a child molester and kick you out, but they're going to stop supporting you and try to find someone who does. Because the party knows that the more money they have, the more they can elect their own people. So everybody's part of a cog in a machine. Most representatives spend more time. And I think looking at like John McCain's schedule one year, I think he was in a course of 1 year at like 320 fundraisers. That's almost one a day. And that's weekends. Sometimes he goes to multiple ones where you go to a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you might just stop by Capitol Hill, in your office on the way. You cannot fundraise from your public office. You've got to go to a place, like they have really dingy cubicle walls and office parks where you go for the Democrats or Republicans and you just go and you can't bring cameras in. People have snuck out their scripts. But essentially, that's what makes them stay around, is you don't want to lose support of your party. And because of that, money from lobbying groups helps. That does a lot more for you than calling individual donors. So a lobbying group that then says, I will give you all this money towards PACs that help you. I'll do X, Y, and Z. That helps keep you in office, allows you to fundraise more or less, depending on how much money you get. Or makes you more powerful. Yeah. So that's the idea, is you are beholden to money to keep getting reelected. And that's ultimately what keeps you going. The only time that people have bucked this trend is when they're not up for reelection or they've already lost. And they're just, a lame duck waiting for the term to end. But that's basically what drags politics forward, is money. And so when you have a lobbying group as powerful as the NRA, their money matters for two reasons. Even if you don't get any money from them, if you cross them, they can often kick you out of office. They have a lot of members, a lot of publications. They have their own networks online. They have lifestyle brands. They are represented by the gun manufacturers. And ultimately, it's their job to make sure guns keep selling. And whenever things are good, in terms of for them, when you have a conservative, right now, things are good, minus the mass shootings, good when you have a Trump candidate in office. Because it means that your guns aren't going to get taken away.
Which is interesting. He's been, who knows if it's true or not, but he's, said we need to actually do something about this. He also wants to give guns to teachers, which he has said repeatedly, no, I don't want to do that. But then he's now saying it again, and he's talking about, so just so we're being fair to this guy for whatever reason, he's saying that they need to be highly qualified and trained and I'm surprised the word vetted didn't come up, but it's not something that makes me comfortable or I feel that I could agree with, but in terms of the approach, it's a surprisingly more sane version of giving guns to teachers than you might expect. And also when he did a fairly good job of listening to the people who came in to talk about it, he had a note card in his hand
that said, "Listen, and I hear you."
Yeah, but you know what? He still accepted. Like I don't think this undoes any of the things I have a problem with, but I do appreciate the moments where he's willing to, or at least someone has convinced him temporarily to consider what is on this card and be like a decent human being to these people, because at least they didn't have to go through another trauma.
This feels like the Mr. Ed was able to talk simply because they put peanut butter on his lips and he just was trained to move his lips that way. This is Trump moving his lips like Mr. Ed. But at the same time, it's like, what's the difference between him and another president in that sense? It's kind of like the difference is that he's kind of more of a moron, but I think it's hard to tell if he actually gives a shit. That's the thing, is like you could tell other people, and Bush, I wasn't a fan of him, but he actually gave a shit too. Like the idea of you don't want people dying on your watch. You don't want these things happening. And it's hard to tell if he even has the knowledge or understanding that he can now change this. I mean, the idea that bump stocks, for example, after the Vegas shooting, bump stocks are the things that can turn weapons, and I'm not a gun person, but you basically can make a gun into an automatic weapon with a bump stock.
Yeah.
It uses the force from a shot to essentially load and pull back again, from what I'm understanding, and it basically makes it fire more like an automatic weapon. And bump stocks were supposed to be banned after Vegas, but that stalled. And he may actually, granted, in potentially having this be outlawed, the website that sells them crashed because people wanted to buy them. The idea of anything involving guns, this is what drives me nuts, is we can't really have a sensible discussion because the topic is so polarized. Yeah. There was another This American Life episode recently where a woman who's a diehard, Obama's a Muslim socialist from Kenya, she, there was a scenario where there was a gun at a school, and the cops showed up and went through it, and they found a gun, but it wasn't real. It was fake. It was an airsoft gun, but it looked real. And the sheriff, who, is a lifelong gun nut, couldn't tell the difference. It took about 3 or 4 minutes of him investigating the gun. He said it felt weighted correctly. It was only when he noticed that the clip and certain things about it didn't seem to match, but it looked like a gun. And that was after a few minutes of fiddling with it. Now, of course, if a kid has that and a cop shows up and the kid's holding it, they're not going to have the luxury of time to test it before they shoot the kid. So basically, she was trying to pass a bill that banned realistic-looking toy guns.
But the woman who is an Obama hater wanted
yes,
it?
Yeah, because it's a toy gun. It's not a real gun. It's a toy gun.
But so real guns are fine, but toy guns are not fine.
Yeah, because the idea is
this is a hard one to wrap your head around.
Yeah, because a toy gun is not a gun. A toy gun is a toy. It is not a gun.
And kids should only be shot if they're playing with real guns.
Yes, more or less.
Especially those who turn 18 while they're still in high school.
Yes.
And can actually buy a real gun.
Yep. So that's her plan. And in the Deep South where she was, it was pretty clear a lot of over 18-year-olds are probably finishing school. Yeah.
The thing is, I get the why they're you can join the army at 18 because or why that was an age that made sense at one point. I don't think it necessarily makes a whole lot of sense now, but I can still see. First you want people who you can brainwash is the wrong word, but they have to be trained to care about their team is not the word. I sound like an idiot right now, but the people in their group about their fellow soldiers, they have to care more about that than themselves, and so you're trained accordingly, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's easier to do with younger people. I can come up with a bunch of justifications that are not unethical. I don't want to ascribe anything to it other than that, but with buying a gun at 18 and not being able to get a drink until you're 21, it's just lower the drinking age or raise the gun age. But this is the thing that I have a really hard time wrapping my head around. When the way that the NRA approaches gun control doesn't make sense to me for them. They're inviting this topic to get worse and worse and worse, which will eventually cause more problems for them.
But the thing is, they don't care. So here's the biggest thing. So going back to the woman who wanted to ban the toy guns from school, she had to stop supporting it.
Why?
Because everybody believed that she was trying to do something, or she either was like a gun control activist and hiding,
Wow.
but because it involved guns. It wasn't a goddamn gun. It was a toy.
Well, it's such a weird.
It was like, don't allow kids to bring toy guns to school. How is that anything involving guns? Yeah. And she had people go through the legislation line by line, saying there's no way this can be transferred where you get another vote, it turns into real guns are now magically banned. It was about toy guns in schools, and she just stopped supporting because she got so much shit. And the NRA, first they said they wouldn't get involved, but then they kind of did. And the problem is the NRA is a giant machine, and they have a lot of support.
I just don't know. It doesn't seem to make any sense, though. Like, what are they?
Because you're approaching it with a logical framework. The idea is that
why aren't they? I mean, don't they want to do business better?
So here's one of the things.
Guns? I mean, they're letting kids kill kids who will eventually. I mean, this is in Florida, so they might become. There's a bigger gun market in Florida than there is.
This is a kicking in the can. This is a kicking in the can down the road, and they've been able. They are one of the most successful lobbying groups in the history of the country. Because they believe that any laws involving guns just should not exist. And what's interesting is after Newtown, there was significant traction to actually do stuff in Congress. There was unanimous support. It was it was the right time for this stuff to happen. And they realized they couldn't drag their feet. So what they did was they know how people work. Talk about data, and Netflix and other companies building data. NRA has data too. They know about voters and people, and they know when they give a shit and when they don't. They know that if you've got a cooling down period, no joke on that, after a shooting, people stop caring a few months after. Right now it's hot.
Yeah.
But once time goes by, people don't care. Yeah. And so...
Well, if these kids don't let up, and hopefully they won't.
That's the difference. Is victims have never had this kind of vocal support before, and that's why discrediting them is going to be huge.
It's shocking to me.
And Wayne LaPierre
out of Florida.
And Wayne LaPierre already issued statements about it, saying that they're taking advantage of the situation, they're milking it, they're looking for fame. He's trying to discredit them however they can because this is what he doesn't want. He wants it to go away.
Fucking kids.
So with Newtown, what happened was they came to the table. They sat down with Congress, and they sat down trying to draft legislation about what they might support. Because people know that if you are a Republican and you take money from the NRA, even if you don't take money from them, if you were publicly against them, they will try to primary you out. When it's coming time for primaries or elections, they will turn people out to vote against you. Period.
Because this is important. There's something that I did really want to bring up today, and this is a place for it. And I don't want to do this to discredit the people the kids that were, who have been protesting since Parkland. However, there's Emma Gonzalez. I was watching her speech where she talked about the money, how she would ask President Trump if she had the opportunity or if he were to apologize to her or anything like that. She would say, I would ask how much money you've received from the NRA.
If the president wants to come up to me and tell me to my face that it was a terrible tragedy and how it should never have happened, and maintain telling us how nothing is going to be done about it, I'm going to happily ask him how much money he received from the National Rifle Association.
And she said, but it doesn't matter because I already know it was $30 million. On the screen was the source for that fact that she presented, which is actually not correct. And and the evidence that was put on the board, I think it's confusing, and it took me about 20 minutes to make sense of it, or to even find where this was coming from. I can't remember the company offhand. I'm going to try to find it for the show notes because I'm pretty sure it's in the article that I put in the show notes already. Where lots and lots of outlets covered this and quoted her and did not point out that what she said is incorrect. and I don't think she knows it's incorrect, and I don't think it was malicious or anything like that. I was concerned when I saw this. I was like, oh no, this is not going to be good if people jump on this. I wanted to like try to send it her way to be like, like, I fully support what you're doing. Please be careful though, because I don't, now all this conspiracy shit's happening. But so too late.
Reaching out to a crisis actor, geez.
I was hopeful for just a moment that people are like, oh, we're not going to challenge these kids because they're kids. What they're doing is so much worse than what I thought what was even going to happen. I should have known based on what has happened with Sandy Hook, which is appalling. But that is, but the case is there was 11 million about, and rounding here because I don't have the number in front of me, but it was 11 million and something that went to Trump from the NRA directly over for his campaign, during his campaign. And there was about 19 million that went to fund anything that was against Hillary. So there's 30 million in total that was, put into Trump plus anti-Hillary, but it wasn't given to him. Mm-hmm. So what she's saying is not 100% wrong, but it's factually inaccurate. It's and what the actual truth is not good either. It's pretty much, I don't think it's any better. So there's nothing wrong with actually saying what happened, and maybe this is why no one nitpicked it, because it doesn't really matter in the long run. It's still equally problematic, but at the same time, it's like you don't want to leave yourself open to that. And she's young, and I have to imagine it was an honest mistake, because I can't see any motive for, saying the less correct or incorrect, however you want to look at it, version of that information. Mm-hmm. But it's still just like, it worries me when stuff like that is happening, that we're not more careful. And I think we do have to be more careful. And when we see stuff like this, regardless of what side we're on, which I'm very much on her side, and the side of anybody who's been victimized by this, by gun violence or most things, legitimately speaking, not the fake reports of white people getting beat up at Black Panther screenings where they didn't even bother to get fake pictures of that couldn't easily be disproven. Although I guess that's kind of the point. You don't need to.
Yeah, you don't need to, because it doesn't matter, because they know that at a certain point, as long as they get through to 20 or 30% of their people, they're fine.
Yeah. And so I just...
Who reads a retraction? Who cares about facts?
Yeah. And so I don't... and ultimately, it's like what happens in the immediate moment. And this was the problem I was argued with Nick at Gawker over, was it was kind of like report now, correct later. The goal is to just get the news out as quickly as possible and report. But I can point to numerous...
And that's not reporting. Like it's reporting on one level. Yeah, it's talking.
Yeah, and it's like I get there are circumstances where you want to be fast. There are circumstances where you want to be. You can be clear in a fast report, being like, this is the information we have now. Please do not believe this 100%. Not that this happened at Gawker, as far as I know. I never saw an instance of it, and I saw the opposite. But this is the best information we have right now. Please pay attention to the report as it develops, because things may change, things may be wrong. And I've seen, and people do make mistakes, and it happens. But there were instances in which it was encouraged to basically do something incendiary, and then I think, for even though it seems like this probably was somewhat deserved. I don't like the word deserved, but with Leo Laporte, it was reported that he was having an affair because his screen accidentally had some dirty talk on it in one of his shows. He's had lots of instances where he's had porn show up on his on his things. Leo has some legitimate other problems, which is why I said what I said. Like him getting called out for having an affair turned out to be, he was in the process of getting divorced and all this stuff, and maybe an affair didn't occur, whatever. But what Gawker reported, or Valleywag reported, was not an accurate thing.
Yeah.
It didn't do any investigation. It said it asked the question of maybe there's something we don't know here, but it sure seems like Leo's a shitbag or whatever. And whether or not he is or isn't a shitbag, which we won't get into that one today, this wasn't evidence of anything. It was just a misinterpretation, and that's what happens with expedient pseudo journalism.
I wouldn't even call it journalism. Yeah, I mean, it's under the guise of journalism.
It's an attempt at journalism that doesn't really qualify because we're told better to get it out there now. I mean, there's many, many instances of this happening, and it's like, okay, but you can't undo the damage, and so that's something that has to be considered.
And that's the thing. Like, that's why groups like the NRA are more effective at lobbying than other groups, because they know this. Because they know if you can get narratives out early, they know if you can delay things and let there be things that cool down. That's why after the Newtown shooting and there was real movement on actually getting bipartisan, gun stuff done, it would be super lightweight, but it would actually be something forward. And they knew there was support. But what the NRA did is they're like, well, fuck, we have to play along and get this done somehow. But how can we ensure this doesn't happen? Because if we act like we're not being involved, then we're going to be called out of touch and barbaric. So what they really started to do was they now will engage. They basically drag their feet for months afterwards, trying to say, yeah, we'll sign off on this. And then once 6 months had passed, they're like, yeah, never mind. Because they knew that support for it had gone away. Because they know how people work. And that's the scary thing about people, conspiracy theorists, and just anyone, is on average, they'll believe the first thing they hear, even if you show attraction. And if you wait long enough, people don't care as much. It's the sad part of reality.
Yeah. We got to wrap it up, but I wanted to ask a question because I'm just wondering, and if anyone has an answer, I guess, well, look on the screen if you're watching the video. Speaking of which, I think not everyone knows where these are. If you go to awkwardhuman.com/YouTube, youtube.com/awkwardhuman.
Although you should make that
although both might work as far as I know.
Yeah, you should make that into a forwarding domain.
Yeah, I mean, I think videos.awkwardhuman.com actually forwards. But if you go to youtube.com/awkwardhuman, the episodes are posted. The video episodes are posted there for this show and the Awkward Human Survival Guide and any other shows that we end up recording, along with little video tidbits. We're still kind of exploring how we want to do video, but we're recording video of all the episodes and posting them on YouTube for the time being. We'll probably continue to do that because I feel like I've actually gotten the hang of that whole process and it's not so bad anymore. But that said, it is I kind of want to start making more digestible video content because not everyone has an hour or so to sit in front and watch us talk. Even if there are episodes, which this will end up being a lighter one, not in terms of topic, but in terms of the imagery that goes into it. You're mostly just looking at us. And a lot of episodes we actually have video clips, especially when we have guests, with Laserfit. It's filled with examples of. We can have
images of mass shootings if people really want.
Yeah, I don't think I want to go that route.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea.
But that's that's where you can find this. But if you on the screen right now is where you can weigh in on this if you have anything to add to this conversation or to have an answer to the question. It's awkwardhuman.com/supercharged. It's where you can contribute a question to the show, which we actually have one I almost forgot about, so we're going to answer that before we go today. But where you can contribute news to talk about, suggest a topic, give a recommendation of something that you like. It goes directly into our system now, so you can just fill out any of those forms. They're all on that page. Anyway, the question that I wanted to ask is, What do you think is stopping politicians from, stopping wealthy people who oppose gun violence, if they exist?
They do.
I have to believe that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
From putting their money against the NRA in a significant way.
They have been.
Because they can afford it.
They have been.
And the problem is, pay that there are plenty of people who could pay that $11 million.
So they have been. The problem is it's not as much money as the NRA is. Because the NRA is supported by two different things. Private individuals and that whole field of... Because even believe it or not, there are groups that believe the NRA is too liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Which, think on that for a second. That Wayne LaPierre is a liberal. Which is funny. They do. They are supporting anti-gun legislation. The thing is, it's not anti-gun. The two big problems.
But why don't they target the candidates that...
So here are the two big problems. One is... So one thing is NRA has a lot of money and a lot of power. They have the hearts and minds of people already. So there are a lot of established voters who identify as being, I am part of the NRA. So you have a natural membership base. So to build up an organic membership base of people that believe in gun control... That would take time. That base does not exist on the same organized level. Because think about what the NRA believes. They believe they have something that's going to be taken away from them. They're fighting for something. they're fighting to keep something. Versus the gun control people, there are all different levels of gun control. There are common sense people saying, I love to hunt, but assault weapons shouldn't be there. Should be an assault weapon ban, all that stuff. And then you have ones say, get rid of guns completely, like Australia did. Mm-hmm. So people fall on a spectrum where it's hard to pin them down. What group would identify with all of them? There is none. NRA is everyone's part of it. They're all part of love it or leave it. We all have guns. So organizing a group that actually has the same kind of momentum and power of the NRA is really tough. Plus, Democrats don't have any balls when it comes to actually fighting against the NRA because they get money from the NRA too. Mm-hmm. Look at Gabby Giffords. She was shot by a gun nut, and she and her husband still defend gun rights. It's absurd. So the idea of Democrats don't really want to get on this because they know they'll get targeted, no pun intended, by the NRA as well. So that's why, is that the money would be a lot harder to justify spending on and these people are still spending money, but it would not be as effective.
Yeah, and I mean, there is also with the gun nuts who would, do a mass shooting, or not a mass shooting, any sort of shooting really. Mm-hmm. I guess there's the concern of, if you change your politics, will you be a target?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case or not, but yeah, that's it's a complicated situation, that's for sure.
That is the truth.
I really hope that we can get to a better place, because I don't personally give a shit if someone wants to go shoot a gun at a range or do stuff that doesn't involve hurting things. I don't really love hunting, but I can let that go. I suppose if there's if we could just have a conversation about how to keep humans safe from guns in a reasonable, proper way, give some things a try. I'm willing to try. I mean, it really doesn't affect me in terms of anything I have to do, I suppose, that I can think of. But, I'd be willing to try things that I don't agree with. Mm-hmm. I think it's just worth finding out. I mean, we should be able to come together and say, people should be able to go to a concert, go to school, go anywhere, really, not have to worry about some crazy person shooting them who they don't even know half the time.
Yeah.
Or that really, they never impacted, had nothing to do with. It's just, the conversation around mental health seems like a false thing. And you don't want to put guns in the hands of people who have mental disabilities, but there are problems surrounding that, and it's ultimately not. There are plenty of perfectly seemingly sane people that end up shooting, and that handle these mass shootings. It's not, mental health is not a complete answer. How partial of an answer it is up for debate, but it's not going to fix everything.
No, it's part of a larger system of changes that need to happen.
Mm-hmm. So if you have any thoughts on that stuff, which I imagine a lot of people do, but if you would like to share one on the show, please contribute. You can see on the video below. But if not, if you're listening, it's awkwardhuman.com/supercharged. You can submit stuff. You can even submit a video or a audio file if you would like to go ahead and we'll put the video on the show, which actually relates to this question that we're going to answer, because Matthias wrote in about video glitch in Chrome, and he sent in a video example, so we'll actually be able to show it while I'm talking about it. And basically what's happening is it's flickering occasionally. It looks like it actually, the frame jumps, it scales up like an extra 50% maybe. But it's like for half a second. But it's like the frame, it switches to the new frame and then switches back to the old one, which looks like, I mean, there's a keyframe stuttering issue with interlaced video where that can sometimes happen when it's de-interlaced. And that's usually an issue with the video, but it seems like this is a problem that keeps coming up with Chrome on a Mac, especially on laptops. So it might be some sort of decoding bottleneck. I don't really know. I think he hasn't sent over examples of the video yet. I was just checking because he sent a message to follow up when I had some questions, but he can't send those right now. So I'm going to do my best to provide a solution. If anyone else has experienced this and found a better solution or a different solution, feel free to write in as well. Google has acknowledged that this was a problem back in 2016 and seems to have not done anything about it. They said they couldn't give a timeline for when it would be fixed, which is probably because they didn't have one from the looks of it. But at the same time, it seems that hardware acceleration on certain Mac laptops is the culprit for a lot of people. It's not for everybody. Sometimes extensions cause the problem. So I would test the video in incognito mode And I would also try downloading a copy of Chromium so you can see if it has been fixed in a newer version. Just having that around to test to see if your version of Chrome or not is worthwhile. And also the main thing is disabling hardware acceleration. So we'll throw links to those things in the show notes. Tommy, have you ever seen this happen before? Because I actually experienced it recently.
I have, yeah. And the good thing is that you can test out. It used to be that you could only have one version of Chrome on at a time, but now you can have multiple. So there are 4 different versions of Chrome, if I'm not mistaken. You have the stable release candidate one, then you have the beta, you've got dev, and then you've got canary.
Yeah.
And I recommend testing out one of those. I have beta installed. It's always very stable, but I like using beta as an early adopter of stuff. But it's not buggy. Dev and obviously canary.
Yeah, the problem is Chrome is not exactly fantastic on a Mac.
Yes.
It worked great on a Chromebook.
Oh, I bet.
I guess that's the point. Anyway, hopefully that helps. Matthias, let us know if there's anything, if you have any follow-ups on this, and we'll take a look at what might be going on further, as well as anybody else who has experienced the issue, has any advice to provide. I've mentioned that it's awkwardhuman.com/supercharged several times, so that's where to go if you have any info or want to comment on today's topic or submit anything for a later show. So with that said, thank you for listening, watching, or whatever it is that you're doing, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Supercharged. If you'd like to send in a comment or a question, you can do so on awkward.email. You just go on your web browser to awkward.email. It's actually a website. And you can call or text 509-AWKWARD instead if you'd like to just skip all of that and do it from your phone. Also, if you'd like to check out some of our other shows, we've got a lot of great shows now, and we're having more every day, or, eventually. You can do that on awkwardhuman.com/podcast. Go check it out. We've got a lot of good stuff, and we hope that you'll be listening every week. Thanks.